Now, why do families choose unassisted home birth? And I also want to get into some of the stumbling blocks of what really stops people from taking that step to have an unassisted birth. Well, basically, as I've been talking about, you come across this philosophy of childbirth, and the philosophy is that birth should not be managed by someone else. Okay, again, ultimately, the midwife has the final say in managing the birth. She has that final say because you have made a contract, you've paid her, and if push comes to shove and she believes there's a problem, she will tell you to transport, and you will need to transport. Her license could be at stake, her reputation. You know, you're paying for her expertise to ultimately manage your birth, ultimately. All right, unassisted home birth. We do not want others interfering because we have this goal. We have this goal that birth is safe, and everything will be fine. And it is not some Pollyanna, ignorant view. We're not taking our chances. It comes, usually people who choose unassisted birth come from a point of a lot of education or soul searching or just plain old faith in the process, just confidence. What's very important to those of us who believe in unassisted home birth is the whole woman concept. I talked about the concept of just birth being in the physical domain, being of the material, being tangible, what we can see, what technology can do to get you through delivering a baby, what technology can do if something should happen to your baby or your baby is not born completely, normal and 100% in good health. So we are looking for the total empowerment, but not in a selfish way. We know that birth is so much more deeper and so much more important, that it does involve spiritual elements, emotional elements, and it is just very private. We do not want to be surrounded by machines. We want to be surrounded by love. And the people who we invite to our birth are those that we really love, that we really want there, whether it's husband, whether it's children, whether it's your best girlfriend, just because you want her there. Unassisted birth encompasses so much more than what hospital birth can ever encompass, that we really, I would say that birth in the hospital is disordered, it's dysfunctional, and it will never catch up with what happens in the home. And for 20 or 30 years, the hospitals have been trying to make their birthing rooms more home-like and cozy, and people having unassisted births at home are not trying to make their homes more hospital-like. They're not bringing in equipment. They're not, the goal is to make it more cozy, because it is just so much more. People who have unassisted births, it might be their first baby. They have come across this philosophy, and many people are having unassisted births with their first child. Now, a lot of people might think, oh, you've had several children, you know what you're doing, you have this pattern of 3-hour labors, and so the baby just pops out, so it's easy for you to have an unassisted birth. Yeah, that's another pattern that can happen too. There's also maybe a woman has had a C-section, horrible experience, she gets a midwife and she has a VBAC, the second child, maybe the third child, and then she decides to have an unassisted birth. I can tell you that there is a very, very small percentage of women who give birth unassisted who then go back the other way, who then hire a midwife, or who then choose to go to a hospital to give birth. That just doesn't happen very often. It does happen in situations where women are very highly educated in childbirth, doulas. When they have seen problems over and over, or maybe they've seen one problem, it just really sticks on their brain, they can't get it out, and they have let a little fear back into their life. So maybe then they would like to hire a midwife for their next birth. I don't know of too many people who go to the hospital for their next birth. And again, here we're talking about intended unassisted home birth. Those people who have accidental or unintended home births, since they don't really have the philosophy of birth, they will often go to the hospital for their next birth unless something has changed where they have complete faith in the process and the husband is on board with an unassisted home birth. So those are the kind of people who you will find giving unassisted birth. And again, we talk about this topic of interference from other people. interference from regulations or rules really interferes with the woman paying attention to her internal cues. And this is what's really important in the process of childbirth, paying attention to your internal cues, what's going on, what you feel. And I'll share a secret at the end about how unassisted home birth can often alleviate the pain. The pain is just not as prevalent in unassisted birth stories as you will find in other places, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. 3 stumbling blocks to unassisted home birth. 1, fear of what others will think or say. And that comes from your mother, your best friend, your community, friends, family, everybody. So the fear of what others will say and the desire to kind of conform and to, you really can be put on the defensive when you choose this type of birth. You're really asked to explain yourself if you make publicly known what your intentions are to have an unassisted birth. So this takes a lot of energy. It can be very energy draining for women. A lot of people keep this quiet. A lot of people find if they do open their mouths and say they're planning this, then they're put on the defensive. And but in some ways that's good because that makes them think even more deeply about what they're doing and to prepare even more carefully. Number 2, fear of emergencies is what stops people from having unassisted home birth. And the imagination is a great thing. The imagination, when channeled in positive directions, can really help us be successful in life. But when that imagination gets the best of you, when you are concocting many stories about what could go wrong, oh no, the cord could be wrapped around the neck, oh no, I heard this story, horror story from another friend who said, oh, thank God I was in the hospital, oh, this emergency could happen, that emergency. So when people don't really work through what they personally would do with their greatest fears, that might stop them from having an unassisted home birth. And these are important things to consider. But as I've seen in the past several years, the biggest stumbling block to an unassisted home birth is the husband's reluctance, the husband's opposition, the husband's fear. This is a big responsibility in many ways, deciding to birth your baby alone at home with nobody present. And so the husbands often this is a reason why people will compromise and have a midwife at their births. There's many things that you can do. You are pregnant for 40 weeks. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of communication that can go on. There's some persuasion that can go on of your husband. But really, I hope that husbands or fathers of the baby will really put their pregnant wife or woman on a pedestal and understand that she has a heart's desire, and what can I do to honor her heart's desire? But oftentimes this is a stumbling block. I do recommend that people have unanimous opinions on having the unassisted home birth. And if they do not have a unanimous opinion that they both are going to have it, then they need to keep working towards that. I can't tell people what they should do, but I do not recommend springing on your husband the day you go into labor, oh, we're just going to have this baby at home. There's panic, there's fear, there's running around, and it's not a good situation. But the biggest stumbling block, as I see it, to unassisted home birth is that the partner is not really courageous enough. Some current trends in unassisted home birth. I don't like the word trend, but I use it. Trends to me is for fashion, is for something that's fleeting, something that's going to come and go. But people, if we want to talk about trends in unassisted home birth, the greatest challenge that I currently see is that women will be educated enough, courageous enough, and confident enough to give birth at home alone with nobody else. But after that, then a little panic sets in. And then they're calling 911 because they don't know when the placenta should come out, how long. And, so they prepared for a lot of it, but they haven't prepared for this. Some women some may not know that the baby can look purple or blue right when it comes out. So there might be these other issues right after the birth. So immediately after the birth is what I recommend that we also need to educate ourselves about.